nuevo campus de UCLA Graduate Art Studios de California y el Menil Drawing Institute. Su trabajo ha sido expuesto internacionalmente y es parte de colecciones permanentes en el Museo de Arte Moderno de Nueva York, el Instituto del Arte de Chicago, el Museo de Arte Moderno de San Francisco y el Museo de Arquitectura de Múnich. En 2017 fueron directores artísticos de la Bienal de Chicago. Recibamos a Mark Lee.
I'd like to thank Akine for this generous invitation to be here and come and share some of the thoughts, some of the work with you. It was great hospitality when I arrived yesterday that my friend Eduardo took me to Farolito for some tacos. And I haven't been to Mexico City in 15 years, and I had tacos for lunch, and I had tacos for dinner, and I feel like I'm back in Mexico City. I don't know if some of you might know that last year they opened the first Taco Bell restaurant in China. They struggled a little bit in the beginning, but now they're doing well, they're opening more Taco Bells. The problem in the beginning is I think the Chinese had a problem understanding how to eat tacos, so they don't quite know how to approach. So in New York Times, there was an article about this struggle, and then they talked about this Chinese man, this patron, who was at the restaurant with his family, and he didn't know how to eat the taco. So he watched a video that they showed at Taco Bell, and then he said, "Oh, I get it. You have to tilt your head, and then you eat the taco." So he told his whole family, you got to tilt your head, and the whole family tilted their head. I just like that story because it's about like once you know a certain methodology, you can enter the system. I'm an architect, I'm a practicing architect. I'm also a teacher, so I've had my practice for 20 years this year. So I just want to run through some of the projects that I do. I'm not going to really talk about the projects today, but I think being a practicing architect is about production of buildings, whereas being a teacher is about the transference and the production of knowledge. And then oftentimes these two realms and these two directions don't always reconcile or don't always find a certain convergence or a happy convergence. But there are moments when there's certain overlaps begin to actually bring out other things, And so what I want to focus today is a Chicago Architectural Biennial that my partner Sharon Johnson and myself has co-curators or artistic directors of that ran from September of last year until January of this year. When we teach, we often have times to use certain thematics or interests that was derived from our practice. But I think there's also some undercurrents. I think one of the currents is history, the notion of history itself. So for the Chicago Architectural Biennial, the title is Make New History. The title itself is stolen or borrowed from a book by Ed Ruscha. It was an artist book that we had, and every day we look at this book, Make New History. We thought it's interesting not only because it talks about history, but it also talks about the act of making, being something very active. Why history? I think we were participants of the first Architectural Biennial, and we noticed a lot of young practices, a younger practice than ours, that have a very interesting take on history that's different for us from the previous generations. So history is not seen as a remedy for orthodoxy, such as maybe the postmodernists that use it for against late modernism, nor history is seen as something that is a burden, maybe in the way the Beaux-Arts was. But history was seen very much as a horizon, different ways to tap into history. In the book Empire by Antonio Negri and Michael Hart, they talked about this system or this condition that history almost becomes horizontal. We think about today, there's abundance of images and abundance of information. Everyone has access to images and information. And how do you deal with this plethora of image and information? And history, I believe, comes in as a structure that begins to give meaning and give relational logic to all this information that's there. When we think back of the Venice Biennial, I think two biennials that stood out for us. One was Rem Koolhaas biennial, Fundamentals, that dealt with history, that went back into history as a way of thinking forward. For us, we admire that biennial tremendously. We also think that the way that that biennial is structured has a certain sense of historicism, where everything is fit within this 100-year narrative. The other one that we find interesting was the very first biennial by Portuguese, where history was treated as a kind of as a horizontal horizon where you have different moments of entry points. So you can enter from modernist history, one can enter from Baroque history, but it makes different sense to different architects. So for us, I think today where we are, maybe it's closer to this model, and understanding history as a horizon. So when we first came up with this notion of making history, this prompt, we anticipated different types of responses. Certainly there will be architects that dealt with building history. You look back into the history of buildings. Also, some architects look back to a condition before buildings. They look back into a much more primitive or archaic history. There's a history of images, history as representation, not just the buildings themselves, but the mode of representation, the mode of drawing or drafting. There's material history, how materials itself has evolved, and also civic history. So it has to do with scale. So beyond the building itself, the scale of the city also comes into play. When we took on this position as artistic directors, some curators that have done biennials have warned us many things, and two of the warnings that we remember was that you will make a lot more enemies than you will make friends, and that turned out to be true. And the second prediction that a more seasoned curator told us that at the opening day, 100 people will be there, 100 architects, and they'll all come up to you and tell you how great the show is, how great the show looks. Everything looks great except their own piece, which is also true. So we're glad we kind of survived this project that lasted for more than 1 year. But instead of presenting these 4 different types of histories to you as categories or as curators, we'd like to present to you as architects, how we thought about how these things are exhibited or how these things are presented within the building itself. One thing we learned from the Strada Novissima of Portuguese is the sense of scale, going to the street itself, that the exhibition begins to approximate the impact of architecture. So not only do you have things that are represented, things like models or drawings on the wall or on plinths, but you actually begin to feel the presence of architecture, something larger than life or larger than the human scale. And at a time when everything is at your fingertip, everything can be transmitted through screens and the internet, I think going to an architecture biennial, experiencing it, and also understanding a much more slow way of consumption is central to us. The biennial happens in the Cultural Center of Chicago. This is an end of the 19th century building, used to be the Public Library of Chicago until the early 90s. It was designed by Shepley, Rutten, and Coolidge. They came up from H.H. Richardson's office. And these are historical photographs. This was very much a place where people met and read the newspaper, borrow books. It was very much a civic center. Since it turned into a cultural center, which is for exhibitions and such, this place is not as visited or used as before, but it's located right in the center of the city. So we begin to analyze the space itself. There are these great rooms, the room with the largest Tiffany dome in the entire world, a room with these glass dome, the great Army Hall, the former reading rooms, these really beautiful, defined Beaux-Arts rooms. And then on the other side, there are a series of rooms that has been transformed into, in our opinion, kind of characterless gallery spaces when it was turned into a cultural center. So these are white wall spaces, not great galleries, slightly odd proportions, but adequate for exhibitions, a typical type of rooms that you will find in a civic center. And then there are all these strange leftover spaces, these transitional spaces, long corridors, and undesirable spaces. In the first biennial, they didn't have enough room for exhibition. Some of the pieces were exhibited in these corridor spaces, and certainly the participants that were in those spaces were very unhappy. So these are the type of ingredients that we have, these really well-defined rooms, these modified gallery spaces, and these leftover transitional spaces. So how do we deal with it? I think the first floor of this cultural center, the gallery spaces. We try to create these type of black rooms, black rooms that are much more immersive, and then have exhibitions hanging around them. So a very defined structure where different thematics begin to emerge, where different architects were also invited to create site-specific installations. So Anna Javoska, for example, a Chicago-based young architect who was always interested in the motifs of classical architecture, whether it be the vault, the arch, the column, but oftentimes abstracted. She designed this room where the information desk is, as well as a series of architectural elements that were devoid of their functional or structural purposes, like columns that didn't support anything, as the main entry foyer of the exhibition. Or Rachel Geiser, a Swiss architect based in Houston and teaches at Rice, concocted this room for books. There's 4 quadrants to the room. One quadrant is a bookstore. The other quadrant is the archive, a selected archive from Stanley Tigerman's library that he began to relate his books to his work. A quadrant where the exhibitors' books are published, as well as a quadrant where books are being produced. So throughout those 3 months where the biennial was going on, there are constantly zines that are being Xeroxed, that are being made. Adjacent to it is an immersive exhibition of a video by 51N4E from Belgium with fragments of the square that they're designing in Tirana, as well as Henri Salah's work that he collaborated with. In the central foyer, right past Anna Javoska's foyer, the first entry hall, is a space designed by Frida Escobedo. This is the earliest sketch of her work, and she's interested in the notion of the grid and created this type of platform. And at the end, she created this plinth that starts from 0 and slopes up. And it's built by a series of modulated wedges that over time could change and could be reconfigured. So in the opening day, it was basically a continuous slope. And then over time, it became a series of lower, flatter platforms where chairs and table could be inhabited. So it became a very informal space where lectures happened, where performances were done, kids were running up and down and sometimes sitting very informally or eating. And right adjacent to it, in the foreground, you see a model by Derek Delacamp. Derek is interested in this notion of the wall, the role of the wall that not only divides, but also can be a wall that connects. And he placed this whole piece right in front of the stair. The main stair that takes you up. So right when you think you have a front axis, you have to walk around and negotiate around the model of this wall. I mean, it's a beautiful model and quite brilliantly cited, I must say. And adjacent to it, there's a room about tectonics and structure. There are 3 towers by Barkov Leibinger from Berlin, where they looked at 3 types of construction systems: the Plattenbau from East Berlin, the prefabricated concrete panels, together with timber and wood construction coming from Tessenoff's Festspielhall, as well as this notion of thicket coming from, the idea came from Robert Smithson's and Nancy Holt's video of these photographs of these tumbleweed. So they interpreted these 3 models into 3 different types of structures for housing. And in the same room is Stan Allen's work, who has been interested in the balloon frame, who actually came from Chicago, was called the Chicago frame. And this is an ongoing interest of how a very vernacular type of construction can be the construction material for larger buildings. These are some of the smaller variations of types that Stan Allen has been studying. Or Design with Company has been fascinated with the steel details of Chicago construction. And so they surveyed a series of floor plans, the structural floor plans of these Chicago buildings, and begin to emphasize some of the details and create this almost soloid type of installation of recombination and reconfiguration of these type of details. In the same room is Toshiko Mori that created a large-scale model of this art center in Senegal that she had designed and constructed. It's very interesting to see how a kind of parametric way of thinking smooth surfaces can be combined with a more indigenous and local way of construction. And right across from that room is a collaboration between Aranda Lash, very digitally savvy and brilliant young architects based in Arizona and New York, in collaboration with a native Indian American craftsman So they created these type of artifacts that is a combination of this digital parametric thinking together with a very traditional way of crafting. And this type of a combination between technology and something very traditional, we also see in other works, such as in China, Aki Union. They have been interested in using robotic ways of constructing bricks, very traditional bricks, or looking at very traditional typologies, but digital ways of conceiving them as well as building them. So you get to see these buildings that are on one hand very traditional, that fits within the historical context, but on the other hand, like new unexpected type of morphology begins to emerge. Also, Zhao's standard architecture in Beijing also begin to study the transformation of the hutong. Or from Italy, Piovini Fabi. This is a young practice. They were fascinated by Franco Albini's metro rail system in Milan in the mid-50s, 1950s, where there's a certain optimism and gaiety with modern architecture. Albini went to all these type of fabricators and the stone manufacturing and also the metal screens that create things that were specifically for the metro rail. Later on, a lot of these materials became ubiquitous material, like the Pirelli floor. This plastic Pirelli floor was actually developed for the metro. Then we see much later on in industrial spaces or kitchens by British high-tech architects. But the Piovini Fabi went back to the manufacturer and found the original materials and began to use those materials for domestic settings. So what was used as the walls became tables. The handrail that was designed between Albini and a graphic designer was transformed into a lamp. Some of the wall panels, the blue wall panels, were built into a locker. So there was this historical dialogue between materials that are being reused in different ways. We also see this in this Greek practice of point supreme. They showed a house with materials that come from various resources, new materials, as well as found objects or savage objects, and they begin to build these totem poles that show the different use of materials, almost like a material palette, right across from the photographs of the house. I think this type of thinking about reuse also happens in the planning of new buildings, such as HHF Architects in Basel, planning this parking garage at the outskirts. While they plan the parking garage to accommodate a certain amount of cars that are needed immediately, they also know that in the future there will be, with ride-sharing programs, with the way that the whole periphery is changing, they would not need that many parking spaces anymore. So as they plan the parking lot, they preemptively think about how this parking structure, or part of this parking structure, could be transformed into offices and housing. So that substantially changes the dimensions and scale of the parking lot itself. In an urban scale, like this is still very much an architectural scale. In urban scale, you see architects like Dominique Perrault. Besides his architecture work that's known, he has been doing a series of collages where he began to envision what the underground of metropolis would look like, or how could we utilize the underground of a metropolis from New York to Paris. We see Lan Architects, who is rethinking the Haussmann plan. They study the Haussmann plan and implement it to situations that are of use today, as well as implementing the Haussmann plan onto a series of other cities. AWP Architects, also from Paris, were doing a series of maps of the underground infrastructure in relationship to things that were happening above. So all these basically happen in these rooms with these black boxes. So oftentimes these black boxes are immersive case experiences such as this one by Arnold Brandenhuber. Within another black box is Work AC from New York, and they have been studying the transformation of these Juergenstiel buildings in Lebanon, and created this whole type of landscape. Or Erich Mateus from Portugal created a video room in one of these black boxes that shows some of the projects that were paused or that were unfinished during the crisis, and how these buildings, as states of ruins, begin to affect the site around them. This is one of the black boxes. This is a collaboration between Jürgen Meyer-Haar in Berlin and Philipp Ursprung, the historian in Zurich, called Cosmic Latte, and they're interested in the whole notion of the color beige, how the color beige both represents in one psyche of war, watching the desert wars on TV, as well as the most benevolent color for public buildings. Just to show the context of also team architects. And also Ludovico Centis from Italy celebrated the anniversary of the Chicago Pile, the first atomic reactor that was done 75 years ago, with an 80% replica of the first Chicago Pile. There's a floating impenetrable black box that was sitting in the, one of the foyers. So that was the first floor. The second floor is a series of what we call salons, these drawing rooms. One of the first rooms is a collaboration between Adam Caruso and the artist Thomas Demand, as well as photography by Helen Benet of Caruso and St. John's models, where there's a huge plinth with a tableau of 5 projects. Some are built, some are not, but almost straddles between a kind of imaginary and a real landscape, with Thomas Demand's wallpaper that covers the entire room, with images of their references that affect them, as well as Helen Benet's photographs. In the adjacent room, you see these 2 towers by Studio Mumbai of Bijoy Jain. Uses a very traditional technique of these ceremonial towers that are used for wedding to create miniature skyscrapers with a backdrop of 1-to-1 scale sketches by Portuguese architect Ricardo Back-Gordon. So these are like very extremely lightweight approximation of buildings. And right across, you have Made In from Geneva, and collaborations with the students at the ETH begin to create these collages of improbable spaces where one building is collaged within the other, but if you don't know the building, it looks quite natural, but almost has this kind of Hans Hollein, collaging the battleship onto this landscape, but in a much less shocking way. And then also we have almost 800 drawings or variations of a single type by Peso von Ellinghausen from Chile. It's a very mathematical way of not only thinking about the type of this building with base and tower, but also a series of color variations that at the end, I think there was 795 or 94 of them, was the logical number and conclusion with this formula that they've set up. And in many ways, that the Peso von Ellinghausen's drawings remind us of John Haydock's drawings, from the 70s. Also this axonometric projection. And we managed to show 2 pieces, rather pop pieces, by Stanley Tigerman of that generation of the Chicago-based architect. Right next to Jeannie Gang did a 1-to-1 scale study of a building of hers that the inspiration came from half timber frame or Tudor-style houses. So for us, seeing this kind of 1-to-1 scale building, right next to it is Junior Ishigami's large-scale model of a chapel, which is more than 2 meters high. It's a chapel in Tokyo that has an open roof. And when you get closer, you thought it was a sculpture, and then you begin to see the scale figures that are tiny, and you realize how crazy this building is. And then also much more traditional type of representations. Like these are studies of geometric configurations of Baroque churches by Cameron Wu from Cambridge, or Jorge Otero Palaus from New York, who has been doing this series of dusts where he used latex to imprint and make imprints from historical buildings, and some of them are historical for architectural reasons, like the Trajan's Column, and then there's some that has socio-political issues, like this one was from a building that was bombed during the terrorist attack in Norway. You can see the scar of the previous wall and such. So the way that we dealt with these leftover spaces or in-between spaces, we actually wanted to dial those spaces up. Rather than seeing these corridors or leftover spaces as undesirable spaces, we actually commissioned architects to give them a certain character. So on the lowest floor, Paul Anderson and Paul Preisner from Chicago and Colorado collaborated together to create 5 rooms that are an enfilade built out of concrete blocks and cladded with these glazed bricks that are used quite ubiquitous in American public buildings. So in a way, they created this type of really strong hallway, but begin to define the rooms. And also the glazed brick begins to reflect a lot of natural light that brightens this kind of rather dark corridor space. Right above is an installation by So Il, Solid Objectives Edinburgh Lou from New York. It was a leftover from the first biennial, but we wanted to keep a palimpsest of what happened before. And it was a series, it's like a very cathedral-like space in one of these hallways with ramps, but were built out of metal studs. And then on the top floor, Agenda Architects from Medellin created this long hallway built up. This is a study that's built out of these curtains that were imprinted with images of plants from Medellin. So this is the installation. It's really, this corridor was such a difficult space, and they really transformed it into something quite different. On one hand, it is the representation or the images of the vegetation of that neighborhood, but also there's a certain reference to the curtain wall buildings of Mies van der Rohe or early Mies van der Rohe's work. When you walk through the space, you're not right away, you're not quite sure are they images of vegetation or are they marble spaces. And also how these curvature of the spaces create these type of more intimate spaces where you walk in and then you have this one-to-one relationship with the work of a project for a coffee plantation factory that they have designed in relationship to the historical study of the pieces, in relationship to Mies van der Rohe's primitive huts, and in relationship to the landscape that was done by an artist. As another corridor of the space, we see Pascal Flammer's piece, a very primitive but with a kind of pastel colored pieces standing at the edge to the end of the corridor, and with a wall relief that was done by Andrew Zago from Los Angeles. They've always been interested in the history of color, from Goethe to Corbusier. He was trying to think of like spatial dimensions that can be done through the overlaying of these type of color spaces. The nice thing of doing it in the corridor is that you never really have the chance to step back or the space to step back and see the whole thing. So the piece occupies your entire peripheral vision. So it's a really immersive experience. So for us, it's great to see this piece in relationship to other architects like Elena Manfredini, also from Los Angeles, that were interested in the digitized version of Mies van der Rohe's facades, or Jennifer Bonner from Boston that has been interested in this type of coloration, to maybe a more urban scale, like Keith Krumverdi from New York that has been designing this type of new American suburban development. And in this hallway, he created this type of panorama through the language of very historical architecture. Or one of the most difficult spaces, corridor and leftover spaces, Go Hasegawa here, created a series of drawings done on gold leaf. And this is a space really hard to describe unless you're there. But he put, on the upper left-hand side, there's a clear story light, but he put a very light scrim there. And that light scrim, in relationship to turning off the lights, in relationship to the reflection of this gold leaf, really kind of make that space quite magical. Like a space that no one paid attention to before, just wanted to get through it as soon as possible, as quick as possible. You suddenly walk through this kind of dreamlike space with a strange defamiliarization. So we thought like this type of installation was something that we were interested in terms of an experience that you create in the biennial. So there are many other leftover spaces, like this is on top of the stair where Monetnog architect from Belgium created these two sculptures, Make Big Plans and Make No Little Plans, that were derived from a Daniel Burnham quote. So two of these kind of billboard-like buildings. And then Jan de Wilde of De Wilde Vinktalu, also from Belgium, created a series of column installations that penetrate different types of columns that are non-supporting, that are more space-dividing devices that begin to take on different spaces within the building. Or the design collective Blast, based in Berlin and Paris, collaborated with Artec, with the furniture that was donated, and begin to create clothes or structures around these furniture. And the pattern of the furniture actually responds not only to the fabric of the material, but also to the room itself, such as the floor pattern as well as the ceiling pattern. So in the more defined rooms, in the real Beaux-Arts rooms, those are the hardest spaces for us to design installations, because no matter what you do is always overshadowed or by these type of strong Beaux-Arts details. So two rooms that we focus on, one we call the Horizontal City, where we invited 25 architects to each choose one photograph of an interior that's important to them or to their work, and we asked them to reinterpret that photograph as a vitrine or as a diorama that represents their work. Now, we gave each of them a volume and a block, but what we didn't tell them was that the configuration of all these volumes was the first iteration of Mies van der Rohe's master plan for IIT. Not only because the master plan for us is a historical legacy of planning that came from Chicago itself, but we are interested in the notion of this kind of vastness of scale between the urban plan and the super intimate scale of the interior. So we begin to see architects like Urban Lab from Chicago begin to picture an image from ArchiZoom or this type of infinitely multipliable space, and they begin to think about how that could be translated. Another architect, Kuramak Ku from Zurich, were interested in this very similar notion of out of Lowe's American Bar, where it's an extremely intimate and introverted space, but the mirrors that Lowe's had used in the clear story area begin to multiply the ceiling. So this notion of forever expansion together with a very intimate and introverted space were similar interests between these two different architects. So these are some of the models that they've done. Or Mayo from Barcelona, they chose this picture of Marcel Duchamp's door that closed on both directions, and they're thinking of the door itself as a piece of furniture, and how they can think about the future house that was just made out of furniture and these doors as thresholds that begin to minimally define a space or an enclosure. So this is an overview of all the installations with Bureau Spectacular in the foreground, interpreting a Lowe's Mueller house covered in fur, or we see like the first office. So it becomes something that seeing the whole space reminds you of Mies van der Rohe's plans, but also necessitates you to look very deeply into these, or very closely and intimately into these installations. Right next to this large installation is a master plan by Sana of an expansion of the Mies van der Rohe campus plan towards the lake. So there's a project that is dealing with the master plan, and then another room with a project that alludes to that master plan. So that was the first room. The second room is an installation we call the Vertical City, which is located at the former reading room, the upper room of the building that has natural light coming in three sides. So what we have done is that we have invited a group of architects to reinterpret the Chicago Tribune Tower competition, another important project that came out from Chicago itself. So besides the architects who were commissioned to rethink the skyscraper, we also recreated two of the skyscrapers. One is Adolf Loos entry, and the other is the one by Ludwig Hildesheimer that was never submitted as an entry. But for us, maybe these two are not necessarily the highest quality, but for us maybe represents the opposite ends of the spectrum, with many great projects in between, like that of Ilios Saarinen's. So here you see these 16, 17 feet, 3 meters tall towers that begin to also form a hypostyle hall, like a one-to-one scale hypostyle hall, while being a scale model of towers at the same time. So on the foreground, you see an installation by the Chicago artist Inigo Magano Ovalle. Next to the Lowe's Tower is a glass brick tower by Moss. And in the middle is a tower by Patricia Barbas from Portugal. On the left, you see the Hildesheimer Tower. In the middle is Sam Jacobs from London. And on the right is Kuhn Melvezzi from Berlin. In the foreground is Charles Waldheim's studies of existing Chicago skyscrapers, but distorted based on different solar priorities. whether it's solar gain for the building or solar gain for its neighbors. Francis Carré in the foreground have been thinking about these public spaces in the middle of the skyscraper that serves the immediate area of the floors that it is adjacent to. And then right next to it is the tower by Productura. Instead of designing a high-rise, they designed two mid-rises that are stacked on top of one another. Two similar but not the same type of buildings. In the center of the room is Tatiana Bilbao. Tatiana created a superstructure and invited, I think she designed like 90 or 190 lots and invited 15 different offices to create buildings that could be plugged in. So in many ways, it suggests that one could think about a high-rise in the same way that one could think about a horizontal planning or think about a street and how that could be done. This is not a tower, but a totem pole by 6A architects. 6A did an interior project in London where they studied the history of that room, and they found out that that room was dismantled one time and moved in the 19th century to Chicago, shown in the Art Institute at the museum as a period room. And then later on in the 1940s, that room was dismantled and shipped back to London and back into the space that they were designing this interior for. And so they're fascinated about the story of this moving from Chicago to London. So they designed this totem pole based on all the moldings of that room. And they sent out invitations to all these wood turners around the US and asked them if they would donate one of these pieces for them. And whatever material they use, whatever finishes they use are completely up to the wood turners. So at the end, this becomes a collective project, and this is an agglomeration of all the wood turners' donation being consolidated together as a totem pole. Anton Garcia Abril from Madrid and Cambridge were interested in pushing the cores of the building to the extremities so that you have a free space in between. Sam Jacobs in London were interested in reusing a lot of the details from John Soane's architecture. I think there were 180 details from Soane's piece in his tower. Or Siri architects from London were trying to build a tower out of these living platforms, at the same time not looking into Western traditions, but Eastern traditions of creating the simulation of or approximation of a pagoda tower. You know, where they really thought through the details in terms of also thinking about the habitation of how these towers are. Office, Kirsten Gears and David Van Severen were thinking about the lowest common denominator of the palazzo, and they used a series of scale palazzos to create the tower with a mural done by an artist. So at the end, for us, this Perry-style hall is something that works in concert with this incredibly ornate reading room that was there. So adjacent to it, there's some other projects. This one is by historian Sylvia Lavin. She was interested in the notion of models, the role that models play in the evolution of architecture. And the first European museum that was dedicated to architecture is the Frankfurt Architecture Museum, the interior designed by Matthias Ungers. And she recreated the Ungers house in the house model that's morphed into two buildings. And inside that building, there are replicas of the models that were in the original collection that built the museum. And then the original models themselves were being shown at Princeton University, and there's a live feed between Princeton and the biennial. Right adjacent to it is another one-to-one scale room by Balcu in Milan, who collaborated with Stefano Graziani to create their version of the Giotto's chapel in Padua. They created their own narrative of the interior with a series of murals. And right adjacent to it is Dogma, who did a series of brilliant drawings of this one-room space. So for them, that's the lowest common denominator of this one room. So there are rooms of Virginia Woolf's house, or Virginia Woolf's room, or Sigmund Freud's room, to architectural rooms like Hannes Meyer's Existence Minimum. Everything is drawn with a computer, but drawn with these kind of single lines in the manner of Heinrich Tessenow. You know, so there are the installations on the interiors as well as the exterior. But I think one thing that we are excited about was that we also invited artists to come and collaborate with architects as well as create certain type of installations, such as Veronica Kendorfer from Berlin, who photographed the Neue National Gallery of Mies van der Rohe under reconstruction or under renovation. So every dust that was on the glass, every construction debris is captured. So something beautiful and utopic, but also dystopic at the same time. And everything is silk screen on glass, and it's leaning. So it reflects the environment that you're in, as well as the space of the imagery of the Neue National Gallery. Or Luisa Lambri from Milan, who has always been focused on the interior space as well as these details. She was commissioned to photograph the Farnsworth House, and she created this series of pictures, and always never singular, they're always serial, and she installed it together to show different times of the day. Or Philipp Scherer from Zurich, were taking these photographs, satellite photographs of Chicago buildings. You know, the rooftop of the buildings, they're almost abstract, and formed this installation. Daniel Everett from Chicago, who have always long been influenced by the cityscape, the traffic patterns, and or David Shalio were interested in these buildings that are on the outskirts of Chicago that are being demolished, and the whole social history of those buildings. Or Marian Mueller photographed the cultural center, but reinstalled these photographs in unexpected spaces throughout the cultural center, such as these vitrines. And then lastly, James Welling, who commissioned to photograph a series of Mies van der Rohe buildings. And the way he photographed them digitally, but used 60s analogical methods of dealing with color through a digital lens to create these type of photographs. You know, like this one from the Lakeshore Drive apartment. You know. So at the end, James Welling's photographs becomes a frieze around this Beaux-Arts building. So besides the mothership where all the installations are, there are other venues that we try to engage the city, such as James Welling's photograph together with Gerard and Kelly, another artist. Installation was shown in the Water Tower. We had a few installations at the conservatory. This is Francois Perron, who was interested in these air structures right in the center of this greenhouse. Or Philippe Ram were doing these type of heat-sensitive panels. Or So Ill, together with Anna Privashi, designed these kind of wearable screens for musicians. So every time, for wind musicians, so every time you breathe and blow air, it actually helps, theoretically helps filter the air through the space. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Michel Agou-Charloux se recibió del Instituto de Estudios Políticos de París con un máster especializado en Administración Pública. Además, estudió Historia del Arte en la Universidad de Burdeos y es doctor en Filosofía de la Universidad de la Sorbona. Desde 1987 se ha desarrollado en el ámbito de la arquitectura y del urbanismo. Actualmente es directora general de Ordenación y Planificación Territorial de Burdeos. Démosle la bienvenida.
J'y vais quand? Elle présente d'abord, elle dit quelque chose, non? J'attends qu'elle ait fini. je peux cliquer, il y a l'ordinateur là.
Ah, d'accord.
J'appuie sur les images, c'est facile.
Ah, d'accord.
Je devrais y arriver. Si j'y arrive pas, je dis oh oh. D'accord.
D'accord.
Mais la vidéo, je ne sais pas la lancer. La vidéo, c'est eux qui la lanceront.
Oui, nous sommes.
D'accord.
On va télécharger dans notre ordinateur.
D'accord.
On
Ouais,
va passer.
ça marche. Ça marche.
Recibamos a Michel Larouche-Arlou.
Bonjour. D'abord, je vous prie de bien vouloir m'excuser car je vais faire mon intervention en français. J'ai un peu honte, mais si je la faisais en espagnol, je pense que vous ne comprendriez rien du tout. Alors, merci d'abord à MEXTRÓPOLI et à Miguel Agrea de m'avoir invité. Je suis très heureuse de vous parler un peu de Bordeaux. Je ne vais pas vous montrer d'images tout de suite et je ne vais pas vous parler d'architecture, donc ça va vous changer un peu. Je vais essayer de vous parler de ce que j'appelle les clignotants de la ville. Alors quand je dis clignotants, je veux parler des signaux qui s'allument, des petites lumières qui s'allument dans les grandes villes européennes et qui nous disent qu'il y a un certain nombre de choses qui sont en train de changer, notamment dans les usages. Alors, avant de vous parler de Bordeaux, je vais vous parler rapidement d'une étude qui a été menée par 2 think tanks français sur différentes métropoles européennes, des villes italiennes, anglaises, allemandes et françaises. Et le but de cette étude était d'essayer de pointer tous les usages émergents dans les métropoles européennes, tout ce qui arrive et qui n'existait pas finalement il y a 20 ou 30 ans. Alors très rapidement, qu'est-ce qui apparaît dans cette étude? Première chose, c'est pas très bon signe, plus de 50% des habitants des grandes métropoles européennes ont envie de vivre ailleurs. Alors ailleurs, ça veut dire vivre dans des villes beaucoup moins ou des espaces beaucoup moins urbanisés. Alors évidemment, quand on est dans le centre de Paris ou dans le centre de Londres, le pourcentage est beaucoup plus élevé que lorsqu'on est dans le centre de Bordeaux ou dans le centre de Bordeaux, parce que Bordeaux est la plus belle ville de France. Il n'y a que 35% des Bordelais qui voudraient vivre à la campagne. Ça, c'est le premier élément qu'il ne faut absolument pas oublier. Alors ensuite apparaissent une série d'usages nouveaux. Alors, en matière de travail, par exemple, ce que privilégient aujourd'hui les habitants, c'est le télétravail, mais pas forcément le télétravail chez eux. C'est quelquefois le télétravail, mais à 100, 200 ou 300 mètres de leur domicile. C'est évidemment tous les espaces de coworking, et il se met à y en avoir énormément en France en tout cas. Et donc l'idée qu'aller travailler tous les matins dans un bureau, évidemment là je parle des gens qui travaillent dans des bureaux, aller travailler tous les matins dans un bureau est une façon de voir l'existence qui n'est plus du tout majoritaire. S'agissant des déplacements, ce qui est privilégié par les habitants, on s'en doute, il n'y a rien vraiment de nouveau, ce sont bien sûr les transports en commun. C'est bien entendu tous les modes doux, notamment le développement du vélo. Alors j'ai vu qu'il y avait aussi beaucoup de vélos à Mexico. Il y en a moins qu'à Bordeaux ou qu'à Paris, mais je vois que ça se développe ici aussi. Et puis un grand appétit, un grand vers tout ce qui est nouvelle façon de se déplacer de façon collective ou individuelle. Alors évidemment, individuel, c'est le covoiturage. On apprend à partager une voiture, on apprend à prendre une voiture électrique dans Paris, par exemple, ou dans Bordeaux. C'est aussi tout ce que les gens imaginent qu'apportera un jour la voiture à hydrogène, la voiture électrique, et puis un très grand intérêt pour l'apparition des navettes autonomes. Vous savez qu'en France, il en circule une à Paris, une à Lyon, une à Nice, bientôt, j'espère, une à Bordeaux. Et donc, il y a un très grand nombre de personnes qui considèrent que, j'en reparlerai tout à l'heure, l'avenir des transports va sans doute passer, des transports en commun va sans doute passer par le développement des navettes électriques. Alors, s'agissant de la démocratie participative, ce qui sort de cette étude, c'est que ce ne sont pas des très bons chiffres, ce sont même des chiffres très mauvais, que 75% des personnes interrogées considèrent qu'ils ne sont pas assez associés aux grandes décisions qui concernent l'aménagement de leur ville et que pratiquement autant de personnes souhaiteraient un budget participatif. Le budget participatif, ça veut dire en France que la collectivité, la mairie par exemple, va voter un budget et que les citoyens vont décider, dans certaines limites bien sûr, ce qu'ils souhaitent faire avec ce budget. Alors, deux dernières choses encore. Accueil des réfugiés, c'est un problème évidemment majeur en Europe, notamment les réfugiés politiques, mais aussi bientôt les réfugiés climatiques. Là, 50% des habitants sont relativement réticents pour accueillir des réfugiés, mais plus on s'approche des centres-villes et plus les réactions des habitants des centres-villes répondent à une acceptation du fait que la ville est un espace multiculturel et que l'accueil des réfugiés est quelque chose de relativement naturel. Alors, ce qui est plébiscité par absolument toutes les personnes sondées, c'est l'idée que la ville manque d'espaces verts et que tout ce qui concerne l'agriculture urbaine, les jardins partagés, etc., ça semble être ce qui manque le plus aux habitants des grandes métropoles. Alors, comment maintenant vais-je lier ça à Bordeaux ? Alors Bordeaux, très rapidement, je vous montrerai les images tout à l'heure. Bordeaux, très rapidement, il y a 20 ans, c'était une ville, vous voyez où est Bordeaux, dans le sud-ouest de la France, très beau climat, tout est parfait, très beau patrimoine. C'était une ville qui avait perdu 100 000 habitants, c'est-à-dire le tiers de sa population. C'était une ville qui était surendettée, donc qui n'avait absolument plus les moyens de faire de grands investissements. C'était une ville qui était asphyxiée par les voitures, parce que depuis 30 ans, tout était fait pour les voitures. C'était une ville dans laquelle il n'y avait plus d'investissement privé. Et c'était enfin une ville dans laquelle le patrimoine magnifique de Bordeaux était totalement laissé à l'abandon. Nous sommes une grande ville patrimoniale parce que nous sommes situés, comme vous le voyez, dans le sud-ouest de la France, et donc la ville a été protégée par les bombardements des dernières guerres, notamment la Première et la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Alors 20 ans après, qu'est-ce qu'on peut dire de Bordeaux ? Bordeaux a regagné 60 000 habitants et on aura regagné 100 000 en 2030. Bordeaux est à nouveau dans une situation financière saine. Bordeaux a réalisé 77 km de tramway en 20 ans et donc a réussi à vider son centre-ville de ses voitures. La qualité de l'air dans le centre de Bordeaux est meilleure que la qualité de l'air dans la périphérie de Bordeaux. Évidemment, les investissements privés sont revenus. Et depuis 2007, Bordeaux a été classé par l'UNESCO comme le plus grand ensemble urbain au monde. En fait, il y a 1800 hectares de la ville de Bordeaux qui sont classés au patrimoine mondial. L'effet, évidemment, c'est que le nombre de touristes à Bordeaux a été multiplié par 5. Nous avions 1,5 million de touristes en 2000 et nous avons presque 8 millions de touristes en 2017. Alors évidemment, la transformation de Bordeaux fait que la ville a été surmédiatisée. Donc on s'est mis à parler de Bordeaux dans l'Europe entière. Et du coup, on voit apparaître des petits clignotants qui sont les revers de la médaille. Alors les petits clignotants, alors finalement il y a des clignotants qui sont les mêmes que ceux de Mexico, même si vous êtes une ville 50 fois plus grande que Bordeaux. Le premier clignotant, c'est que Bordeaux est devenu une ville chère et donc se loger est devenu difficile. Les prix des logements ont été à peu près multipliés par 4 à Bordeaux en 20 ans. Le deuxième clignotant, c'est que les déplacements en voiture dans la périphérie de Bordeaux, pour ceux qui habitent loin de Bordeaux, parce que les logements sont chers dans Bordeaux et qui veulent venir travailler et qui ne peuvent pas prendre les transports en commun, les déplacements en voiture sont devenus difficiles. Moins difficiles qu'à Mexico, mais on est une plus petite ville, donc 1 heure de déplacement le matin et 1 heure le soir, c'est considéré par les habitants comme insupportable. Troisième clignotant, il y a des projets immobiliers partout puisque la ville se développe et il y a de plus en plus de recours contentieux contre ces projets immobiliers. Il y a de plus en plus d'habitants et de citoyens qui ne veulent pas entendre parler de la densité, qui ne veulent pas avoir de voisins et qui donc se réunissent et forment des recours pour empêcher les projets immobiliers d'avoir lieu. Et puis, 2 autres petits clignotants. Alors un qui est plus étonnant, c'est que la multiplication des touristes fait que, pas tout à fait comme à Barcelone, mais on voit un petit mouvement qui se lève en disant les touristes sont responsables de l'augmentation des prix des logements à cause du développement de Airbnb, qui est très 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 important à Bordeaux. Et puis les touristes, en fait, contribuent au fait que la ville est plus chère et donc ils finissent par rendre notre qualité de vie moins remarquable. Et puis après, le dernier clignotant, c'est pas vraiment un clignotant, c'est que Bordeaux a obtenu une foison de labels absolument extraordinaire depuis 10 ans. Nous sommes la ville, nous avons des labels pour tout. Nous avons même les meilleurs restaurants de France, mais ça, c'est pas vrai. Nous, on a quand même un label qui dit ça. Je pense que trop de labels peut également devenir un handicap pour la ville de Bordeaux. Alors, l'exercice maintenant, c'est de se dire qu'est-ce qu'on projette pour l'avenir? Comment fait-on pour prendre en compte ces petits clignotants, même s'ils ne sont pas encore très forts? Et comment fait-on pour penser la ville à horizon 2050, mais également à horizon 2030? Alors, avant de vous en parler rapidement, 3 petites règles. Je vais vous parler de Bordeaux, mais je pense que ce que je vais vous dire s'applique à d'autres villes, évidemment françaises, et beaucoup d'autres villes européennes. Première règle, nous considérons qu'aujourd'hui, nous devons, quand nous pensons la ville, nous devons la penser en termes d'usage, en termes de services, beaucoup plus qu'en termes de propriété. Alors vous le savez tous, hein, c'est la société collaborative, c'est le développement d'Uber, c'est le logement de la copropriété, du copartage, etc. Donc la question de l'usage l'emporte sur la propriété. Deuxième règle, il faut absolument casser les silos. Il faut absolument que nous cessions de penser que si je suis spécialiste en matière de déplacement, je ne m'intéresse qu'au déplacement. Si je suis spécialiste en matière de logement, je ne m'intéresse qu'au logement. On n'y arrivera que si on pense globalement l'emploi, le logement, les déplacements. Ça, c'est la première règle. Mais en même temps, cette règle, elle est globale, mais il faut être en permanence ancré dans le contexte de la ville. Il n'y a pas 2 villes identiques, il n'y a pas 2 quartiers identiques. Donc il faut avoir comme règle également que tout ce qui se construit doit être adapté au contexte culturel, au contexte économique, social, mais même au contexte géographique, évidemment. Donc il y a une phrase qu'on aime bien à Bordeaux, et cette phrase c'est le site qui fait le projet, et c'est le projet qui fait la règle. Moi, je pense que nous aurons gagné le jour où la règle suivra systématiquement le projet. La règle qui précède le projet, en général, elle a comme résultat que le projet est moins bon parce que la règle a empêché le projet de s'épanouir au maximum. Donc, en même temps, il faut être global et en même temps, évidemment, il faut penser local. La troisième règle, c'est qu'il faut en permanence mixer les échelles de temps et les échelles d'espace. Les échelles de temps, bien sûr que notre objectif à nous qui travaillons pour les villes, c'est de penser à horizon 2030, 2040, 2050, mais en même temps, si nous ne sommes pas capables d'apporter des réponses aux problèmes immédiats, nous allons être traités de rêveurs. Donc la formule que j'aime bien, c'est de dire il faut voir loin, mais en même temps il faut viser court. Donc en permanence, il faut faire le va-et-vient entre ce qui va se passer dans 30 ans, parce que dans 30 ans c'est quand même l'avenir de nos enfants ou de nos petits-enfants, et ce qu'il faut qu'on amène tout de suite comme projet. Il faut que ces projets n'obèrent pas, ne perturbent pas en fait les grandes politiques publiques à élaborer avec un objectif à horizon 2050. Et puis après, les échelles spatiales, il faut évidemment qu'on pense aménagement du territoire et sans doute au-delà des limites de la ville. Et en même temps, il faut qu'on pense les circuits courts et la façon dont on peut aujourd'hui vivre sur un petit espace avec des petits kilomètres qui nous séparent de notre alimentation, de notre travail, etc. Alors si je reprends maintenant les items que j'ai évoqués tout à l'heure, comment on peut répondre à ces signaux, à ces clignotants de la ville? Alors premier clignotant, les logements. Les logements sont trop chers. Donc évidemment, la réponse est simple. Il faut faire des logements moins chers. Ça, je pense que dans le monde entier, tout le monde cherche à faire des logements moins chers. Alors qu'est-ce qu'on essaie de faire à Bordeaux, à court terme? Et puis après, je vous dirai ce qu'on essaie de faire à long terme. Ce qu'on essaie de faire à court terme, c'est de développer plusieurs pistes. Une des pistes, c'est d'essayer de faire des logements sans passer par les promoteurs privés. Alors ça, c'est ce qu'on appelle l'habitat coopératif ou l'habitat participatif. Alors c'est très fréquent en Suisse et en Allemagne, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a un collectif de citoyens qui se réunissent et eux-mêmes vont monter leur projet. Donc en fait, ils n'ont pas besoin de passer par un promoteur et les prix des logements du coup sont plus bas que ceux du marché. Ensuite, on essaie de développer, évidemment, on n'est pas dans l'autoconstruction à Bordeaux, je pense que c'est très, très fréquent au Mexique, on n'est pas dans ce mode de faire. On essaie de développer, alors Aravena fait la même chose au Chili, ce qu'on appelle les volumes capables, c'est-à-dire vendre des logements qui ne sont pas terminés. Et donc les gens achètent des logements très en dessous du prix du marché et ils les terminent eux-mêmes. On essaie de développer aussi des systèmes de location-vente, c'est-à-dire que vous allez d'abord louer votre appartement et puis vous allez l'acheter au bout de 10 ans et vous l'achèterez au prix qu'il valait 10 ans avant. Donc vous allez le payer, là encore, en dessous des prix du marché. Et puis aujourd'hui, on est en train de réfléchir à l'idée que, au fond, pourquoi devrait-on être propriétaire de son logement pour l'éternité? C'est-à-dire, pourquoi nos enfants hériteraient-ils de notre logement? Donc on pense à des formules comme le logement à vie. Vous êtes propriétaire de votre maison ou de votre logement, mais simplement pour le temps de votre vie. C'est-à-dire que vos enfants n'héritent pas. Mais du coup, c'est une forme de location et du coup, vous allez payer beaucoup moins cher votre logement. Alors, à long terme, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour que les logements soient moins chers? Pour que les logements soient moins chers, il faut aller construire, c'est bête, il faut aller construire dans des zones où les logements sont moins chers. Donc vous comprenez tout de suite que ça renvoie à une politique d'aménagement du territoire très différente parce que on peut acheter un appartement loin de la ville, à 40 ou 50 km, mais ça n'a d'intérêt que si vous y avez un emploi, si vous y avez un système hospitalier, si vous y avez une université, etc. Donc à long terme, je suis absolument persuadée qu'il faut revoir les cartes d'aménagement du territoire, mais sans doute du monde entier. Les villes ne peuvent pas continuer à grossir de façon obèse, parce qu'à ce moment-là, on se prépare à une vie qui est tellement inéquitable en termes sociaux qu'on va sans doute vers une explosion. Alors ensuite, donc c'était le logement. Ensuite, le travail. Alors, à court terme, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? À court terme, effectivement, on essaie de développer. C'est un peu compliqué, mais les entreprises commencent à le comprendre, le télétravail. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a beaucoup d'entreprises qui acceptent aujourd'hui que 1 ou 2 jours par semaine, les salariés n'aillent pas travailler dans leur entreprise, mais travaillent ou chez eux ou à côté de chez eux. Parce qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui disent « je ne peux pas travailler chez moi ». En revanche, s'ils avaient la capacité à avoir un bureau à 200 mètres de chez moi, j'irais. Du coup, on voit, par exemple, les chemins de fer français, les gares, développent dans les gares des espaces de coworking ou des espaces où vous pouvez louer une pièce pour travailler. On voit aussi des promoteurs immobiliers qui construisent des logements, mais qui réservent des étages pour du coworking ou des surfaces que vous pouvez louer. Pas forcément parce que vous habitez dans l'immeuble, mais vous pouvez habiter à 200 ou 300 mètres de l'immeuble et votre entreprise va vous louer un bureau où vous irez 1 jour ou 2 jours par semaine. Toujours sur les questions de travail, on essaie de développer, alors c'est plutôt pour les start-upers, c'est plutôt pour les jeunes qui ont peu de moyens et qui ont un mode de vie très particulier, on essaie de développer des immeubles qu'on appelle coworking, co-living. Donc le co-living, ce sont des appartements qui sont partagés, qui sont de tout petits appartements, mais avec beaucoup de services. Et puis le coworking, c'est un millefeuille, vous avez un étage de co-living, un étage de coworking. C'est en train de se développer et c'est un très grand succès. Alors troisième item, les projets immobiliers qui sont souvent handicapés parce qu'il y a beaucoup de recours contentieux. Alors, il me semble qu'il y a 3 règles. Bon, en France, il faut savoir que tout le monde critique toujours les promoteurs immobiliers en trouvant qu'ils gagnent trop d'argent, qu'ils construisent des logements trop médiocres et que les collectivités ne savent jamais suffisamment les restreindre. Ce n'est pas tout à fait vrai quand même. Il y a un énorme progrès et aujourd'hui, il y a beaucoup de promoteurs immobiliers en France qui construisent bien. Néanmoins, je pense que la première règle, c'est qu'il est totalement absurde d'aller construire des immeubles hauts et denses dans des quartiers d'habitat individuel. Bien évidemment, dans un quartier d'habitat individuel, les propriétaires ne veulent pas de voisins et ne veulent pas d'immeubles hauts, donc ils font des recours et en général en France, ils gagnent. Mais en même temps, on nous dit les logements sont trop chers, vous devez en construire beaucoup. La deuxième règle, quand même, c'est que si les promoteurs immobiliers ont quelquefois mauvaise réputation, c'est aussi parce que quelquefois, ce qu'ils construisent est assez médiocre. Il y a une chose qui me frappe beaucoup en France, alors peut-être que c'est la même chose au Mexique. En France, quand vous voulez acheter un logement, vous allez vous endetter pendant 30 ans, c'est-à-dire toute votre vie professionnelle. Et vous allez accepter d'acheter un logement qui est quelquefois très médiocre. Alors que lorsque vous achetez une voiture qui coûte beaucoup moins cher, si votre voiture vous est livrée avec une petite rayure sur la carrosserie, ça va faire un scandale national et toute la presse va en parler. Mais sur la question des logements, étrangement, les habitants acceptent des choses qui ne sont pas d'une grande qualité. Même si, encore une fois, de plus en plus, on voit se développer en France et en Europe des projets de très grande qualité. Et puis la troisième règle, me semble-t-il, pour les projets immobiliers, c'est que le développement de l'intelligence artificielle, de la robotique, de la société du numérique fait que de plus en plus, nous allons construire des logements qui seront des logements connectés, notamment tous les logements qui sont à destination des personnes vieillissantes, et que peut-être que ce qui va permettre l'acceptabilité de projets immobiliers denses, c'est leur capacité à l'innovation et le fait que demain, moi j'ai une maison et peut-être que je vais me dire, tiens, ce que j'ai entendu dire du projet qui se construit me donne envie d'aller y habiter. Donc je pense que plus les promoteurs seront innovants et plus ils seront, non pas expérimentaux, mais plus ils seront audacieux dans ce qu'ils proposent, et plus sans doute ils vont convaincre les habitants que habiter chez un promoteur, ce n'est pas forcément une grossièreté. Alors, avant-dernière chose, les touristes. Alors, donc on a presque 8 millions de touristes. C'est vrai que le développement de Airbnb est assez compliqué à Bordeaux, comme il est compliqué pratiquement dans le monde entier, parce que vous avez maintenant des professionnels, c'est-à-dire des gens qui ont acheté des logements et qui ne les louent que pour Airbnb. Ce qui fait que quand vous cherchez un logement, vous avez du mal à le trouver. Néanmoins, le développement économique de Bordeaux, aujourd'hui, qui n'est pas du tout une ville industrielle, il est quand même très largement dû aux touristes. Ce qu'il faut considérer, c'est que les touristes n'ont absolument pas tous les droits. Alors souvent, les touristes français, d'ailleurs, quand ils sont à l'étranger, ils considèrent qu'ils ont tous les droits. Les touristes, ce sont des citoyens temporaires, ce sont des citoyens provisoires. Ils ont les mêmes droits que les habitants de Mexico ou les habitants de Bordeaux. Et je pense quand même que pour les pays pauvres, les villes qui sont en déclin mais qui ont un grand patrimoine, avoir des touristes en quantité, c'est quand même une chance. Alors, dernier tout petit clignotant, mais il ne clignote pas encore, c'est tous les labels que Bordeaux a obtenu depuis 15 ans. Alors en 2015, Bordeaux a été qualifié de ville du bonheur. En 2016, ville préférée des Français. En 2017, Lonely Planet a estimé que Bordeaux était la meilleure destination touristique au monde. Donc finalement, tous ces labels, c'est très bien, on est très très fiers. À mon avis, il y a un risque. Le trop de labels, ça incite à la paresse, parce qu'on considère que ça y est, on y est. Ça incite à la vanité, parce que du coup on pense qu'on n'a pas besoin d'aller regarder ailleurs, et puis ça incite à la démesure. Nous sommes une petite ville, donc ce n'est pas nous qui allons accueillir les Jeux Olympiques. Donc je pense qu'il faut qu'on reste très bon dans notre catégorie. Tout ceci, ça renvoie quand même à des sujets qui sont des sujets d'aménagement du territoire. Alors, l'aménagement du territoire à court terme, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour essayer de régler tout ce dont je viens de vous parler ? Eh bien, il n'y a pas d'autre solution que de passer des alliances territoriales avec les petites villes et les villes moyennes qui sont autour de Bordeaux. C'est la seule façon d'arriver à régler les questions de logement, les questions de déplacement, les questions d'emploi. Mais à plus long terme, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire l'aménagement du territoire ? Je ne vous ai pas parlé des changements climatiques, je ne vous ai pas parlé des impératifs du développement durable, mais au fond, on sait tous que il va falloir d'une façon ou d'une autre que nous devenions des métropoles qui vont approcher la neutralité en carbone ou qui vont devenir des métropoles autosuffisantes en termes énergétiques ou autosuffisantes en termes d'eau, etc. Si vous prenez la ville toute seule, la métropole de Mexico ou la ville de Bordeaux, il est évident qu'en 2050, ni la métropole de Mexico ni la métropole de Bordeaux, toute proportion gardée, pourra être autonome en termes alimentaires. Évidemment que non. De la même façon que la ville de Bordeaux, Mexico je ne sais pas, mais enfin la ville de Bordeaux, elle ne pourra pas être neutre en carbone en 2050. C'est absolument impossible. Ou alors il faudrait raser la moitié de la ville et planter les arbres. De la même façon, je ne sais pas si Mexico pourrait être à énergie positive en 2050, mais il faudrait que vous ayez réglé le bâti ancien, les voitures, etc. Même si on est très optimiste, il y a peu de chances qu'on y arrive. Donc la seule façon d'y arriver, c'est de considérer qu'une métropole et une ville n'est pas une entité autarcique. En fait, la métropole, elle doit vivre avec son arrière-pays. D'ailleurs, elle a en permanence avec son arrière-pays des échanges. Et donc, aujourd'hui, l'arrière-pays, la campagne, ça ne vaut rien. Et moi, je pense qu'on va réussir à faire des métropoles équilibrées le jour où on aura donné à ce qui n'est pas construit une valeur immatérielle qui sera égale, peut-être pas supérieure, mais qui sera égale à la valeur des actifs de la ville bâtie. C'est-à-dire ce qui n'est pas bâti, ce qui est de l'ordre du paysage, de la nature, ça a autant de valeur que ce qui est bâti. Or, aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas du tout le cas. Donc finalement, de quoi on parle? Là, au fond, on parle de 2050 et on se dit, la seule question que nous devrions nous poser, c'est comment allons-nous nourrir, soigner, loger, éduquer, former 10 milliards d'individus en 2050. Et je pense que quand on parle des villes d'aujourd'hui, on doit absolument avoir cet horizon temporel parce que les décisions que nous prenons aujourd'hui, ce sont des décisions qui vont engager l'avenir. Si vous prenez l'exemple des transports en commun, est-ce que nous devons continuer à nous endetter dans des infrastructures de transport extraordinairement lourdes, qui sont celles du XXe siècle, pour transporter beaucoup de personnes d'un point A à un point B. On sait aujourd'hui qu'un tramway, par exemple, ça a un coût d'entretien extrêmement important. Est-ce qu'il ne faut pas décider qu'on met sur la recherche et le développement les milliards qu'on met sur les infrastructures traditionnelles pour se dire que demain, on aura une autre façon de se déplacer? Alors évidemment, c'est un risque, on risque de se tromper. Mais en fait, il y a une phrase en français qui dit que 100% des gagnants au loto, le loto c'est un jeu d'argent, ont acheté un billet. Donc on va bien être obligé d'acheter des billets pour 2050 en espérant que ce sera les billets gagnants. Je voudrais terminer par quelque chose qui n'a absolument rien à voir avec ce que je viens de vous dire, mais qui est le devenir de l'actuel aéroport de Mexico. J'ai participé au workshop organisé par l'ambassade de France en début de semaine sur ce sujet qui est un sujet fascinant. Donc je pense que certains d'entre vous, vous avez peut-être assisté au compte-rendu de ce workshop. Alors je vais me permettre de donner un avis qui n'engage que moi. Si j'étais, mais je ne le suis pas, quelqu'un de très important à Mexico, ce que je ferais, c'est que je commencerais par choisir un chef de projet indépendant. Je me mettrai d'accord, État et Ville de Mexico, pour choisir un chef de projet. Et ce chef de projet, je lui demanderai de réfléchir à la préfiguration de ce que pourrait être le système de gouvernance qui va décider de l'avenir de l'aéroport de Mexico. Et donc, je lui demanderai de faire 3 choses. La première chose, c'est de monter une société d'aménagement dans laquelle on trouverait la ville, l'État et puis tous ceux qui ont des intérêts à s'y trouver. Je lui demanderai de monter un conseil de surveillance, de transparence, dans lequel j'inviterai des gens de la société civile pour vérifier et évaluer la façon dont la société d'aménagement conduit les choses. Et puis, je lui demanderai d'élaborer un cahier des charges. C'est quoi l'aéroport de Mexico, l'actuel aéroport de Mexico demain? Qu'est-ce que vous en attendez? Qu'est-ce que l'État et la ville en attendent en termes de services publics, en termes de services privés, en termes de type de logement, etc. Et puis après, quand la société d'aménagement serait créée, je lui donnerai 3 conseils. Premier conseil, c'est de ne pas vendre en macro-lot à des promoteurs. C'est de lancer un concours d'aménagement de projets urbains. Et une fois simplement que le projet urbain sera connu et validé, à ce moment-là, de vendre sans doute certaines parties à des promoteurs, mais de fixer le prix auquel on vend aux promoteurs, de fixer ce qu'on appelle les charges foncières, c'est-à-dire de fixer le prix au mètre carré en fonction du programme, ce qui va éviter de vendre très cher à des promoteurs qui ne pourront pas réaliser le programme parce qu'ils auront acheté trop cher. Donc on vend au juste prix. Et ensuite, je donnerai comme conseil d'avoir la capacité d'encaisser les plus-values, parce qu'en fait, il n'y a pas de raison que l'État, la ville de Mexico, c'est-à-dire, j'imagine, en grande partie les contribuables, financent des aménagements dont d'autres vont profiter. Et donc, dernier conseil, parce qu'on le fait à Bordeaux et on le fait beaucoup en France, je pense que ceux qui vont acheter une partie des terrains, ils devront participer financièrement à la construction de tous les équipements publics de proximité qui seront nécessaires pour la zone. Quant au projet architectural lui-même, moi je ne suis pas architecte, je ne peux pas vous en parler, mais mon vœu, c'est que les architectes mexicains réalisent sur cet aéroport un projet qui sera la carte postale de Mexico en 2050. Voilà, je vous remercie. Alors, trois images très rapidement. Le maire de Bordeaux, Alain Juppé, ancien Premier ministre. Voilà l'état de Bordeaux il y a 20 ans. Donc vous voyez des voitures partout, un patrimoine très un patrimoine en très mauvais état. Voilà quelques images du patrimoine bordelais en 1995. Voilà l'extension de la tâche urbaine, comme pour Mexico, hein, comme pour toutes les villes européennes depuis 1950. Voilà nos lignes de tramway, 77 km. Voilà tout notre système de multimodalité, tram, tram-train, bus, vélo et bateau-bus, parce qu'on a un très large fleuve. Nous sommes la deuxième ville française pour le développement du vélo. Voilà notre tramway. Voilà des bicycletteries, des endroits où on peut stocker ses vélos sans se les faire voler. On est plutôt bon pour le tri sélectif des déchets. Voilà le jour où nous avons été classés au patrimoine mondial par l'UNESCO. Voilà un exemple d'immeubles restaurés et ravalés. Quelques vues de Bordeaux. La vue la plus emblématique de Bordeaux, les quais de Bordeaux, le miroir d'eau réalisé par le paysagiste Michel Corajou et le tram devant la place. Voilà la liste de nos labels, il en manque. Je passe rapidement. Voilà. Alors quelques images Bordeaux avant et Bordeaux aujourd'hui. Avant, donc la très belle place de la Bourse, qui était un parking. Aujourd'hui, avec le miroir d'eau. Avant, les bords de la Garonne. Aujourd'hui, toujours des voitures. Aujourd'hui, la place de l'Hôtel de Ville et la cathédrale à gauche. Aujourd'hui, avec le tram, vous voyez qu'on a été drastique pour la suppression des voitures. Voilà une petite place du centre historique avant. Et la voilà maintenant, c'est le paysagiste français Michel Desvignes qui l'a aménagée. Voilà une autre place. Elles étaient toutes comme ça, les places de Bordeaux avant. La voilà aujourd'hui. L'opéra, avant et aujourd'hui. Alors, oui, l'avant-dernière image, nous faisons beaucoup de concertations avec les habitants. On a un système de concertation qui est très adapté au type de projet, c'est-à-dire que nous faisons quelquefois de la coélaboration de projets, quelquefois de la concertation, quelquefois de l'information. Voilà une fête au bord de l'eau. Et alors maintenant, si vous m'accordez encore 2 minutes, je vous propose de regarder une toute petite vidéo qui est la vidéo d'Agora. Nous avons comme MEXTRÓPOLI une biennale d'architecture et d'urbanisme à Bordeaux. J'ai un film long de 12 minutes.
D'Agora, c'est d'essayer de décaler le point de vue, de trouver des exemples, d'ouvrir le débat et de montrer que, d'une certaine manière, c'est plus les questions qui sont posées qui sont importantes que les réponses.
Pourquoi Agora? Pourquoi la ville de Bordeaux a-t-elle voulu consacrer 3 jours à l'architecture, à l'urbanisme, au design dans notre ville?
Agora, c'est très important pour Bordeaux parce que les thèmes concernent Bordeaux. Le fait qu'Agora prenne ces thèmes et qu'ils puissent être mesurés à l'aune d'une dimension internationale, c'est une manière effectivement de la faire vivre.
Introduire de l'avenir dans cette ville ne manque plus de subtilité.
On est au virage, à un virage très important de Bordeaux. C'est le moment où la ville va pouvoir s'éclater.
L'Agora de Bordeaux a cet intérêt d'être très plaisante parce que c'est un lieu de rencontre.
L'Agora est réussi quand le public s'en empare, quand les gens ressortent et ont compris quelque chose. C'est vraiment un moment extraordinaire.
C'est un outil qui nous permet de mieux comprendre le monde, d'y trouver une place.
Du point de vue de la pensée environnementale, qui devient écologiquement incorrecte, comme si lui a plaidé pour des faibles densités.
La création d'Agora, elle avait pour objectif de permettre aux habitants de mieux comprendre la ville.
C'est pas parce que je dis je suis une métropole que je suis une métropole.
L'espace public, c'est une représentation collective.
La rue est vraiment l'opposé de l'alcôve, quelque part. Et moi, je trouve que toute la construction contemporaine du couple, etc., est très liée à l'espace.
Ceux qui viennent trouvent plus de questions en repartant que de réponses.
Je crois que plus on se dirige vers le digital, plus on a besoin de ce côté physique.
Il faut que la réglementation arrive à donner des principes, mais je ne pense pas qu'il faille légiférer sur le beau.
C'est pas seulement un artiste, un architecte. Pour moi, un architecte, c'est une position politique.
Dans toutes les villes du monde, il y a ce qu'on appelle le développement naturel. Comment adapter la mémoire du passé à la force de l'avenir?
Le fait de le proposer de cette façon-là me semble à la fois intelligent et positif.
La dimension culturelle et la dimension festive d'Agora prend une très grande importance. Agora est partout dans la ville.
Il faut que tout ça bouge et c'est urgent.
Qu'est-ce qu'on risque si on s'est trompé, c'est qu'on s'est investi.
Donc ici, on est dans un monde optimiste.
Il y a dans la croissance des villes
des moments donnés où il faut s'autoriser à dire il y a un vide, ce vide, il faut le célébrer et le mettre en valeur. Ça y est, c'est parti, ça commence à exister.
Voilà, merci beaucoup.
Brendan McFarlane estudió en SciArc, Los Ángeles, y tiene un máster por la Escuela de Arquitectura de la Universidad de Harvard en Boston. Ha impartido clases en Bartlett School of Architecture en Londres, en la Escuela Especial de Arquitectura en París y en SciArc, Los Ángeles. Es cofundador de Jacob and McFarlane, con sede en París. Entre sus proyectos destacan el restaurante Georges en el Centro Pompidou, el Centro de Comunicaciones de Renault, los muelles de París y la sede de Euronews en Lyon. Agradecemos el apoyo de SciArc. Recibamos a Brendan McFarlane.
Bye. Thanks. Hello. Oops, I think that's a little bit loud. So I'll pull that away. Is that not so? Is that okay? It's not too loud? Thank you for having invited us, myself. My partner is not here today, Dominic Jacob, but we very much appreciate being invited by MEXTRÓPOLI, and a deep thanks of gratitude to Michele Adria. Mexico is, of course, something which we have loved over the years and loved coming to Mexico City, so it's a great moment for us. We feel very touched. So what I would like to do is, in a way, present some of the ideas behind. I present 5 projects. It's very interesting because I've been watching the different themes and some of the different presentations. And of course, it's very funny because I'm, funny in a good way, to be following on the lecture of Michel from France. Of course, it's somehow, this is a strange French connection, which I like. But also there's other connections. And in the last 24 hours, I've seen, the pavilions in the Parc Alameda. We spoke in the digital pavilion last night, you know, the kind of challenges which we face in the present, with, I think, a kind of very topical for also my presentation today. It's something to do with how do we move, I think one of the biggest challenges today as an architect, and interested in language, in form, in kind of all of the issues that make architecture what it is. And yet we're also in a world today which has massive issues which are seemingly beyond everyone's scope, but aren't. I think Michel touched on some of these earlier. You know, how do you meet these challenges with an urban space today? And how do you, I think I specifically want to touch on those with our work. What we'd like to think that we are doing is to try and meet some of these challenges. In other words, we're interested in continuing pushing forward our language explorations, but at the same time trying to meet the kind of environmental, you know, issues of pollution, overcrowding, all of the issues in a sense that are remarkable for our time, along with the extraordinary chances that we have with working with fast-moving changes in technology and the way the cities are developing. And I think those two things, I think one of the biggest challenges today as an architect, we have to bring and work those things together. We can't just think about only the environmental issues, only the way of making a green city work, only the ways of meeting zero carbon footprint impact on the world, but we also have to keep our language, the very kind of essence of what architecture somehow has been about and is about. And we need to keep in focus the working of all of these things together. They're not separate issues. And I sometimes feel the period that we're in, we're very much in a kind of period where we've all of a sudden gone into this area of, okay, these challenges, how do we meet them? What are we going to do? They're extraordinary. They're on a planetary level like we've never seen before. And at the same time, we've just come through a digital revolution and a numeric revolution which has had a remarkable impact on architecture. How is that, all of that working together? They're not kind of separate things, and they're not to be one is not to replace another. And I think that's extremely important to keep in mind in the perspective of what we're doing today. So what I'd like to do is present 5 projects. The first is the Cube Orange, which I think we've certainly the projects from some of our recent past work. It's a project in Lyon, in Paris, in Lyon. And the project is called the Cube Orange. It's in a very interesting site, the site being here in an area between the Rhone and the Saône, a confluence of a kind of a grey and a green river, 2 very famous rivers. And this whole area was an area which, in a sense, was the unwanted area of the city of Lyon. It was the back door. It was the area where one found the brothels, the prisons, you know, escaped convicts, whatever. It was a swampland in the Middle Ages, and it was the area that the city of Lyon did not officially recognize until much more recently in its history. So the old Lyon city, in all its beauty, is here. And what happened was, within a competition, there was a project to develop this reeve and a series of pieces along it. So what we proposed in that, of course, were 2 projects. One we called the Cube Orange, and one we called the Cube Vert, the green cube and the orange cube. But they're both very much based around the idea that here we are on a river. Here we are on an ex-industrial site that now we're completely turning around and making it part of the city of Old Lyon, but it's a new extension to that city. It also has a very important role to bring people along a waterfront and connect the Lyonnais with their river and the waterfront of their city. So there was this thing, there's a French word called parcours, which is a very interesting word, I think, which has to do with not only walking, but experiencing at the same time. And here, within these pieces, we chose to meet environmental criteria in a number of ways. In that sense, we proposed using, building, as I said, on the industrial past. So I kind of moved back through some of the images. These are early images from the 1950s. Railways in the back, and then meeting this idea that if we built to the buildable limits of the site, and so in fact didn't ignored the problems of, let's say, form making of such, but actually treated the building envelope like a found object, which is a recurring interest in a lot of our projects. And then the idea that we could take out the program of what was necessary or demanded and introduce these voids, this kind of tripartite conic system. And the void was very interesting because what it gave us is the idea of, like a chimney, bringing air from the river, which is really like an air route across the city, a very important airway, and bringing air up through the interior of the building. And by doing that, we, through our calculations, along with our environmental engineers, we found we could reduce radically the energy consumption inside the building and introduce also natural climatization at certain times of the year. So that was one of the ways in which we tried to make a low-impact building within this context. Coming back into the conceptual matter, though, we were very interested in this idea that the cube could be cut into by this kind of negation, creating a voided three-dimensional matrix, which is a kind of an ongoing interest of the work. And then this matrix is skinned. Now, the skinning of the matrix, of course, is very interesting for us because we're able to also, again, in another way, reduce radically the heat intake of the building. So it's a double layer we have here. And then there's a third system. Of course, we're very close to the river, so we're able to use like an inverse heat system, heat pump that goes under the river and saves and introduces a lot of energy also into the building during the wintertime, and therefore saves energy. So getting back to some of the diagrams, these have to do with air movement and how we're capturing that through the building. We're capturing natural systems in order to use the idea of this and bring it into the building, but then architecturalizing it to some degree. This is hence where I'm talking about the language of architecture, and let's say the confrontation or the dialogue that one should have, I think, in architecture between these kinds of different interests, let's say. So this is to do with the site, a very urbanized site, giving you some kind of idea where we're architects, we love sections, we have, interest in all of these ways of making things and presenting things. So this is what this is about. Another way of seeing it. We were next to a series of old buildings, which we were asked to keep. And of course, this was this idea also of holding on to history, holding on to the past. Our building, in that sense, is conceived as a kind of an extension of the past. It's conceived, as I said, as a kind of, it's a hollowed out cubicle space, but it's a piece which we see as being in dialogue with its site in a number of ways. Of course, possibly one of the more obvious is with the relation of the geometries of the existing building. But then this is the major cone space that brings the air up through the building, through an ocular space. And then as we move along, we can see a little bit about the parcours, the public space, which is a fantastic space in Lyon. From here, we look out to a kind of a green wall, which is a very unusual condition here in Europe. This gives you some idea of the skin, and I'll try and run through some images, some urban images, giving you some idea of the cone. The cone is very interesting in a kind of social space because it brings basically an office building with different types of offices, different kind of locataires, different levels of the building. They can come together in one void space. So that void space occupies a very important social role in the building. It's used for barbecues, meetings, informal meetings, a space where people can actually literally leave the office but not leave the building. And that's a very interesting aspect. We also wanted this conic space not only to be a kind of an important social function, but also something to be able to look out, get the light, of course, through the oculus, and then look out onto the river. So you've got this kind of, in French they call it a deuxième paysage, which is a kind of a second view. It's not the first in front of you, and it's not the distance. It's the view onto the river. The river in this case was very interesting because of the industrial nature of Lyon as a city. It's never really been a city which has celebrated its water edges. It's always been moving across it laterally through a kind of series of bridges, or linearly along the river, but more in a kind of for industrial or kind of functional necessity. And so here we wanted very much to reintroduce people, the inhabitants of a building, back onto the water and looking out onto the river and celebrating the very nature of the site and the very interesting nature of the site. This has to do with the perforated surface, digitally perforated surface. We have, and again, I could go into the digital economies of making a building like this, but they're very interesting, where we're able to introduce seemingly randomness into a facade, but actually it's not. There's a certain quantity of repetition and then a certain quantity of uniqueness. And all of that, of course, is, again, it's through digital means, digital application, and applying a kind of through new economies, and because we're working with new ways of making things. So this is the roof deck, the roof space, views out over the city. So it's a fantastic environment, I think, to work in. At least that's what we hear. Because there's a lot of nature, there's a lot of aspects to it which are already to do with the site and the situation that we're trying to celebrate. In the bottom of the building, it's a commercial space. So I'll run through these very quickly, which we were involved in creating a showroom. The second project is a project called the City of Fashion and Design in Paris. And it's built along the River Seine. This building was a very interesting building. It was really not a building, it was a piece of what they think is a piece of infrastructure. And that piece of infrastructure, in the turn of the century, 19th, 20th century, it had a series of cranes that were designed by Gustave Eiffel that moved along its length and basically it was like a huge warehouse in the center of Paris. It was a building that was very much hated by Parisians. They saw it as the ugly, beginnings of the 20th century imposing on their beautiful city. And that feeling actually was never something that was it never went away. And when we were contacted by the developer, it was a competition. There were 13 entrants. And the city of Paris basically said, listen, you propose a project. We do not want a hotel, but you propose, and we don't want people living there, but you propose a project, a new program with your developer. So somehow we were involved in this very strange situation. Well, it's not very strange today, but it was a teaming up and a conceptualizing with the developer as to what the future of this site could be. And we immediately saw, the city said you can demolish the building, which we saw as a major crime. And a crime on a number of levels. One, you could say it was environmental. What would you do with this massive piece of concrete infrastructure in the city? Where would you put that concrete? Wasn't it more interesting to keep it and reuse it? And then, of course, there's all sorts of other strategies as to why we kept it. We knew the structure was very interesting to work with. It gives you a little idea with the Notre Dame Cathedral and the monument to the deportees. Here we are, between two train stations, Lyon and Austerlitz, and bordering the Seine River. And so this is the building in, the 1980s, and it gives you some idea of, it was a strange kind of lost kind of creature at this point, interesting but kind of lost. And what we proposed was to take all of those walls out, make it into really take it back to being a skeleton. So keep, in a sense, the grey structure of the building and propose what we call a plug-over. And I'll show you a little bit what the conceptual material of that was, that we took the structure, the matrix of this building, which was a building created by an engineer that had worked in Chicago, came back to France thinking that, deciding that actually concrete was the best thing. He's someone that preempts Auguste Perret by a number of years, and a very interesting character in that sense, and was someone that Le Corbusier also was looking at very carefully and very inspired for later projects like the Domino House. But what we took was this concrete structure, and we said that the structure, the matrix, could we imagine, because we knew the program had to be more than the existing building. And, so in other words, that was one issue. The other issue was, it was an existing building. Could we not put the circulation on the outside and maximize the interior surfaces of these kind of big loft spaces? So a number of issues like that came together. And what we found was a system which we called the arborescent system. It was based on the idea of a point, a line, and a series of 7 lines. And from that, we created a volumetric condition. And at that point, we immediately knew that we could create then a larger condition, which at once belonged to the historic matrix of the building, but then actually created a completely new matrix. So it was in a strange kind of way, it was really about more or less growing a new architecture out of an existing condition. And that growth idea, or the idea of an existing condition that can give birth to a new condition, is something, again, which interests us in a number of projects. I guess it was kind of very extrovertedly realized in a way here. So this system became, of course, we knew we had to be very light. We couldn't put too much weight on the old building because the old building supports. It's the host for this new, in a sense, creature, which is called the plug over, and here it is. And what was fantastic with the city of Paris is that they said the old building is here. They said you could come out over the river by so much, and you could come up 1 floor. So that, of course, gave us this possibility of creating the plug over. So it's a dialogue between the existing condition and the new condition. And again, here there's a whole series of environmental issues that come to play. One is that it's a building that never had a thermal blanket. So here we were involved in creating a kind of a zero carbon thermal blanket over the building by introducing a number of things. One is a system which is a non-ventilated open circulation space, which is possible within the climate of Paris, and we proved it. And the roof, of course, the rooftop is a grassed landscape which reuses water and a series of other things which are quite interesting. So the structure is made up of a series of materials, very simple: wood, glass, steel, placed over the existing structure, which of course is this structure here. What's fantastic with the building is it was proposed, and we hope it will come back into being connected with the water buses along the Seine River. And the city of Paris, I think Michel has touched on Bordeaux. Bordeaux is equally as interesting in their innovative efforts to meet climate change. And I think the confluence these days between architects, politicians, developers is an extraordinary moment historically. I don't think we've ever seen any moment like that before. And so it's a very exciting period. This building was a little bit involved in some of the early stages because, of course, it's now, getting on for maybe, 8 years old. But it was the first foot on an idea of retaking the Seine River and making the Seine River a green corridor. And as you've probably been following, the fight on now, one of the major fights on now in Paris is to actually turn the corridor less and, cut off more and more way for the car and turn them back to being green corridors or landscape spaces for the public. And we can see that the public retake the space with incredible vigor and incredible, excitement. And I think it makes it this space now in Paris has become a kind of an extraordinary, this is a little bit quieter through here, but as you go to the heart of Paris, you can see now on the weekends, and even during the weekday, as we've taken the car away from these spaces and reintroduced the possibility of cyclists, families, you name it, to retake the urban space along the sides of the Seine. It has led to some extraordinary experiences, for the Parisian, which we never had before. If we keep on going, this gives you some idea of the entire inside of the space. Of course, here we were very interested in the concrete, you know, leaving the concrete as much as possible, and finding that place between what do you do with an existing building and how do you come in and leave your new thing very apparent and where the old thing, is, and try and find this issue of dialogue. So, of course, those interests are very much at the heart of any architect as they retake an old building, or should be, because I think they're very interesting issues. The skin here, again, is a solar for reducing solar intake into the building. Gives you some idea of the roof. This is a small pavilion we were involved in recently, but a couple of years ago for a nightclub, which was an extension of the project, and a view back from the river, along the river, at night. We work a lot with artists, but that's nothing new under the sun. In this case, it's Jan Casali, who's a fantastic light artist in France. And then a boutique that we very recently finished for one of France's greatest editors of perfume, Frederic Malle, and it's found in Paris in a very tiny, tiny site. So we're going from extremes here. We're going to a space of 25 meters squared. But here, Frederic came to us and gave us his whole philosophy of making perfume and the world of perfume. And we had an incredible dialogue between us, the architects, and Frederic, the perfume editor. And Frederic talked with passion about the world of perfume and how you would transform space and change space. And he had very kind of clear architectural ideas about this. And I think it led to a kind of a really amazing collaboration. So this is kind of just in a sense to share with you a much more intimate experience. This gives you some idea. The problem with these images, I realize they're a bit cramped. You've got to extend them out a bit. But you get some idea with the different formats. So if I go back to that, it gives you an idea of the street. We're inside a space which is a mirrored space. And in this case, what we wanted to create for Frederic was it's a stainless steel mirrored space, which once you walk into, gives you the idea of a city within a city. It's an infinite city. And we wanted this idea very much of voyage and transformation, both of the individual and the possibility of perfume, in a sense, giving you this kind of idea of, in a sense, being transported and changed and going on a voyage. So all of these kinds of issues were very much at the core of why we chose to not only present the individual bottle in such a way, they're underlit, in a piece of carved wood, which of course is an ongoing interest in our work. You may have known other projects like the Volgens books by artists and the housing project that we did in Paris years ago for Herald social housing. But this idea of this massive matrix, in this case is a quite intimate matrix, again carved into, and the resultant pieces are these pieces. But the resultant pieces have their reflection in another world. And in this case, you need to really go inside the space to see that there's an infinite world. It's an infinite city that one moves into. So these are just some images around the project. Connected House, again, is a very recent project that we just finished for a house which is called Maison Connectée, the Connected House. This idea of touching on demotic technology, the idea that people can, in a way, the limit of their house is maybe limitless. Wherever they are in the world, they're somehow connected with their house. And I thought that was an extremely interesting aspect. The clients came to us, told us all about what that was about, because they had a very private story of how they travel around the world. 5 minutes, okay. And they wanted to make the house very much part of their lives, but wherever they were. So that was one issue. Michel talked about old age. In this case, it was very much a part of the scenario here, where old age for them growing with the house and making sure that the house could adapt to them over time. We had huge discussions with them on this. So these are kind of very intimate kind of aspects to the project. Another interesting, though, architectural aspect is Le Corbusier's apartment building is here. and we're here, and we are in a very large context of 1930s modernist pieces, a little bit like what Frida Kahlo and Rivera were doing with their studios here in Mexico City in the 1930s. This neighborhood in Paris was doing similar kind of things. You had young families coming in, contacting architects, and were very much aware of a kind of the beginnings of modernist possibilities, creating a new house, etc. In these neighborhoods of unbuilt land right next to the city of Paris. So we're very much involved in that historically. The building is imagined as around the metaphor of a tree. We have an old building in the back, which we had to connect to through a pool space, etc. And then and the tree grows up through the building from below ground. So these are aspects of a kind of, we're working a lot with augmented reality now, which I didn't want to really show, but it's an aspect of this drawing, which describes some of the issues to do with the space. Again, there's a whole series of environmental issues that we worked with. This idea of layering, reducing heat intake. We have, again, all of the kind of more or less the latest technology to do with heat pumps, energy flow, etc. within the building. So it's kind of maybe the most complex technological building that we've ever done in the way it works. The frame is an interesting frame. It works in such a way that the structure is a monostructure. It supports a series of boxes, so the frame is an entirely connected piece, and therefore connected, of course, conceptually in another way. And here we are within the context, to give you some sort of idea. Again, the clients are very much about all of the cars are a future use of, light technology, electrical technology, etc. So I take you through some fast images around the house, because I know I have to speed up through this kind of staircase of the tree staircase out into the rooftops with the different bedrooms, looking out through drone photography, overhead drone photography. And then the last one is just it's a project that we finished very recently, so I'll go through, I don't really have time. But again, similar kinds of issues. In this case, it's it's both a concert and a dance school in the city, in the suburbs of Paris, in a very tough suburb, in a very violent suburb. And we're very proud of it because it was a chance of also, we missed the social in a lot of discussions as well. So I think it's this idea of architecture. We cannot talk about architecture in historical kind of modes or frames. I think we need to keep on holding it all together in larger discourses. But there's a very important social thing behind this building, in that it gives hope to a lot of kids in the neighborhood which wouldn't have hope. We have 1,000 students enrolled. They're not coming, of course, any one time. This is this project here, which is really like a new hilltop within the city. And I'm just going to go through some very fast images. A very low budget, but budget, of course, or placed very specifically. And that's the last image. Thank you very much.